Welcome to Top Advisor Marketing, where you will learn how to become a prolific online influencer, attract more ideal clients, and grow your practice. Brought to you by Top Advisor Podcasting, a done-for-you podcasting solution built just for trusted advisors. And now, your co-hosts of Top Advisor Marketing, Kirk Lowe and Matt Halloran.
Hello and welcome to another Top Advisor Marketing podcast. Today is Kirk Lowe, and we're going to talk about hashtag Be Your Own Loud, podcasting, micro-influencer, and more. For those of you who've been listening to the podcast, we've been hinting towards the fact that we're doing something a little different here. And this is really a cumulative brainchild between Kirk and I, but the way that Kirk talks about it is just so much fun for me to listen to because he's the one who did all of the research on the hard numbers and statistics that we're going to be talking about today. And he is so excited about this that you, as our listeners, are going to hear a truly excited Kirk Lowe. Now, Kirk, I just totally set you up. So your energy better be high, brother.
I better start off with a bang, right? So, honestly, this is probably the most fun I've had in my 20 years working in my own business. Coming up with what we're about to talk about, how we've gotten here. I won't get into all that, but it's a fun place to be in your business when you've got the right people in the right seats on the bus, and you've got time to go do something, which I think we're on the cusp of doing something extraordinary for advisors, and obviously in that case for ourselves too. But it never works if it's just for you, right? So it's
true
about other people.
Okay, but why is this so exciting? Why is it so fun? What is it about podcasting, this micro-influencer philosophy that you came up with? What is so intriguing about it?
I think what's so intriguing about what we've worked to create here and is that what advisors struggle with in their businesses and all the advice that they've been given along the years along their path, and how many people come to them in a silo and say, this is what you should be doing, and how many times they read in an article or on the stage at an event or at a booth, all these independent thoughts. And sometimes they're put together collectively, but they're not always the most efficient. They're not all leading edge. But I feel like we've figured out 2 or 3 of the best things that you can do, and they connect together so well. And if they're done right, they can act as almost an entire marketing strategy. And how they pick each other up and impact each other, it's phenomenal. And I think that's what's so exciting about it. And as I tell you all the characteristics of ideas and concepts and strategies that we're going to talk about today, you'll start to put those pieces together, right? That puzzle, that vision of why we're so excited about this should come into focus. And if it doesn't, it just means you're probably not ready for it, or I did a really bad job presenting it.
I doubt that. But it could be that they're not ready for it, or they're not in the right mind space. So where do we even begin? Let's start from the foundation of this whole program. What is that? Yeah,
so the foundation is what you and I are doing right now, which is podcasting. It's being your own loud. It's finding your voice and being courageous enough and intelligent enough to pursue that and to put it in, and don't let anything get in your way. Don't let your budget get in your way. Don't let time management get in your way. Don't let resources get in your way. Don't let anything get in your way, because speaking what you know of and putting it out into the world is one of the most important things about being successful in life and business, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't think I was ever going to get that philosophical, but it was the way you asked the question, which is why you're so good at doing what you're doing, which is why you always should have been doing podcasting.
Yeah. Right? Amen, brother.
So you were missing, and that's what I'm trying to tell everybody is you may not be a podcasting phenomenon, but your ideas need to be shared. And one of the most important reasons why your ideas need to be shared is so that you can get better at expressing those ideas. And it challenges you to want to create more value, which is happening to us all the time. 2 years we've been podcasting, 2.5, something like that. And I'm constantly challenged to not only to come on here and want to do better, but to create better stuff. And I'm also challenged to have more proof of concept and all those things. And it's an incredible medium in my life and my work. And I say my life because it's fun.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy. I didn't appreciate the commitment of writing blog posts as much, or writing white papers. I've done plenty of them. It's not as, I don't jump for joy, if you will, for doing those. Although I like the idea of how to get the concepts out and the outlines out. But anyway, I'm on a bit of a tangent here because you asked such a great question. So let's get started here. And I've got 4 things I want to talk about today.
Okay, yeah, just jump. I love this. What?
Why don't you read the 4 things?
Okay, so it's the four. Okay, well, so we've got the idea of podcasting being the holy grail of engagement. We've got which social networks work best for engaging content, how to proactively expand your podcast and ideal listeners, and then how to become a micro influencer. And I want to go back to something that you said there. When you're being interviewed by somebody, and I've joked with people, Kirk, about how I'm a real nerd about podcasting. I'm actually not as much of a nerd about podcasting as I'm a nerd about interviewing, because that's where I spend the majority of my time, which is why these statistics you're going to talk about when it comes to podcasting are so fascinating to me. But one of the greatest things that can happen on a podcast as the person who is the podcast host is for your guest to say, I never thought about it that way. Or for you to say something and immediately have to write it down because you said something in a way that you hadn't said it previously, because it's different when it's a conversation, right? I absolutely freaking love that. And the greatest thing about podcasting is the intimacy of it. Why don't you jump into that right now?
Yeah, there's no doubt that how my response to your question never would have come out if I was writing an article in my office on my own. It would never have made my article. That's the great thing about having somebody. So thank you for that. So podcasting, the holy grail of engagement, quite a statement. And I'm not trying to offend anybody by that, so I apologize if I am, as in the religious theme of that. But podcasting, let me talk about some stats in podcasting, because these speak for themselves. And I've read and gone through quite a few stats on podcasting. Lots of mildly interesting ones, but these ones all are really blow my mind, especially this first one. The first one is incredible. 49% of listeners of podcasts do so in their home.
Okay, why is that important, though? I love that you focus on that, and I absolutely agree, but our audience needs to understand why that is such an important statistic.
So how many advisors have conversations with people, not have conversations? How many clients or ideal prospects let you into their home on their quiet time while they're cooking dinner, while they're out in the patio watching birds in the backyard, while they're cooking on the barbecue, going for a walk, whatever they're doing? How many people let you into that time in their world, just you and them? It pretty much doesn't exist, never existed for financial advisors, and it does now. And 49% of the people listening are doing so in that context.
I want to add something to this. When I was just in Salt Lake City working with one of our strategic partners who's been on our podcast and who he's on our 99 Best Ideas podcast all the time. His name's Mark Rogers. And Mark and I were talking, and he said, Matt, when I'm listening to your podcast, so he subscribes to the Top Advisor Marketing Podcast, which is really nice. He says, I feel like you and I are having a conversation, but I'm not saying anything. So we know, Kirk, I'm going to get wicked nerdy here about how the brain works, but neurologically, the distance between your eardrum, the nerves at the end of your eardrum and what's called the Broca area of your brain is like a centimeter. So this is immediate, intense processing that goes directly into your brain when it comes through your ears. So not only are people letting you into their own private quiet time, but you're activating an aspect, a part of a person's brain that is so wildly powerful and influential. But none of that matters. I'm going to play devil's advocate with you here. If the people who you want to listen to are not listening. So why don't you go through some of these other stats? Because this is where I think philosophically it's beautiful that we got 50% of people bringing you into their quiet time, but these other stats are just like the icing on the cake.
It's funny because when you think about the idea of it being in a conversation, although only one person is talking, that's a very familiar thing in my life. Like I have an uncle who just never stops talking. I told him he could run a radio station and just he'd be the only person, and he would never run out of things to talk about. And because one thing goes to go to the other. But the truth is when you're in a conversation and somebody's really interesting, you may be nodding and yesing and umming like for a good part of the conversation. So it's not actually that abnormal to have somebody, tell me more, especially if you're the one who signed up and said, you know what, Matt, I really want to listen to your, you mentioned this the other day, or you just mentioned it. Tell me more about that. And it's just you. It's like you just, by clicking on that podcast, you said, tell me more about that. I'm listening. So 49%, that's an incredible opportunity to be in an intimate situation, setting. And that is why engagement is so incredible. And marketers are just now figuring this out because they couldn't statistically determine, and sponsors didn't know this either, that advertising can happen anytime throughout a podcast, and you're likely to listen to it because people are doing it at home. And guess what? They're listening. Most people are listening to the whole podcast or almost all of it. And now they can track that. And they're blown away because they never think sponsors, advertisers, they didn't realize that was going to be the norm. So that's an incredible, finding statistic. Another neat one is that there's 550,000. Now, different groups have different numbers, but I found this to be a good number. And I found it several times in some of the stats I was reading. It was that 550,000 podcasts, like active podcasters in the marketplace. But you're thinking to yourself, 500,000 podcasters, that's a lot of podcasts. But really it's not. There's a lot of people, there's a lot of industries, and there's a lot of people talking about all kinds of different things in these podcasts. So it's not that many. So I would say that it's an unsaturated market. So there's a lot of opportunity for more podcasts to exist. Just think about how many songs, record labels, movies. Anyway, there's a lot of opportunity for new podcasts to exist and thrive. 45% of podcast listeners are more likely to earn $250,000 and more. So that's an incredible stat too. So podcast listeners are typically more educated and they're higher income earners. So that's a great thing for most financial advisors and most people wanting to connect with podcasters or advertise through them. My last stat here is that 70%. So some of you might be thinking, we do get advisors that we talk to who don't understand what a podcast is, or they've heard of the term, but they don't know what it is. But 70% of the U.S. population are familiar with podcasting. So that's a good sign. Now it does say the term podcasting, but that's a lot. And it used to be, I think only a couple of years ago, it was in the 50s. So it's steady growth upwards. Podcasting has never been a fad, which is a really important stat too. So I'm going to read you a quick little quote here from a gentleman named Jason Cox. He's the CTO of Panoply. I think I said that right, hopefully. And it reads, podcasters and advertisers alike have long suspected that their listeners might just be the holy grail of engagement. That's where I stole that, by the way. The medium is inherently intimate and easily creates a one-sided feeling of closeness between the listener and the host. The sense that the person talking into your ear on your commute is somehow someone you know, whose product recommendations you trust and whose work you want to support. That's an incredible validation of podcasts, and I couldn't agree more with that statement. Here's another line from Jason as well. It's a lean-in medium. People are really listening and want to consume all the content is there and available. there's a level of dedication that comes from podcast listeners that otherwise you don't find. Isn't that what we want? What we say, how we want it to be, how we want it to resonate and be connected with people? If you're thinking about, you hear everybody talking about build your own tribe, build your own tribe. Podcasting, I mean, what better way to do it outside of the podcast based on what I just read you?
Absolutely. I think that this is, he touched on a lot of the points that I've connected with, the idea of intimacy, the idea of people wanting to support. And I'm going to digress just for a moment here, because podcasting isn't something that you can do like 3 of them, 6 of them, 12 of them. If you look at the people who are really doing well in podcasts, they've done 100 episodes. You have to show that commitment to your audience. And if you show that commitment, they're going to reciprocate that very, very,
yeah.
very
Your podcast will do better with the more podcasts you have, not just because you'll get better at it, but because people love binge watching or listening. Sorry, and it becomes a credibility statement that if you've been around long enough, you must have people listening to your podcast, right?
Well, read this next quote. You've got another quote here that I love, and I've used this, by the way, Kirk, on some of the sales calls that I've had recently.
Yeah,
what is this
from
next
Miranda
quote?
Katz at Wired, and she's the one where I grabbed those other 2 quotes because she had written an article, which is at wired.com if you want to go check it out. And her statement is, podcasts aren't a bubble, they're a boom, and that boom is only getting louder. Hence our tagline, be your own loud. Which I don't know if we got that from here, because you said it while we were at a conference a couple of weeks ago, and I immediately wrote it down because I thought it was powerful. So, I mean, I totally agree. All the stats point to the fact that this has never been, it's not a trend or a fad podcast. It's incredible. And the more I listen to why it's important and why people think it's the holy grail of engagement, it's just going to get more powerful, and we believe in it more and more every day. And so do the advisors that we're doing, helping produce their own podcasts.
Podcasting alone is wicked super powerful, right? And you and I agree with that. But that's not the whole kit and caboodle here. What we've ended up brainstorming and creating and coming up with because of podcasting, the next section of this, which is, identify which social networks really engage with professional content the most. And Kirk, we were not going to talk about, some of the crazy things that we've tried, but, it's always really important for everybody to understand that this was not a win right out of the gate, right? We have spent so much time and money on Instagram, Twitter, unbelievable amounts of cash on Facebook. And because of testing all of those, we've done A/B tests. We've read, we even have a young lady who's on our team who her whole job for a while was we had a saying called pleasing the algorithm. What do we need to do to make the algorithms happy, algorithms plural happy, to get the posts that we're writing for our advisors seen? And then we settled on one. And why don't you explain why we settled on this one and which one this is?
Yeah, so these stats are going to be pretty obvious. And my favorite one, again, here is going to be the first one. And the first stat is a LinkedIn stat. And this stat blew my mind when I read it. But it blew my mind because mostly because I was so happy that it corroborated what I felt, which is LinkedIn is just a better network for professionals. Not to connect with other professionals, but just to be professional, and for people to be there for the same reasons that you want them there, which is to get better in their business and or life. So LinkedIn users are 11 times more likely to engage in professional content, and that is astounding. 11 times is a big deal. 2 times is a pretty big deal. 11 times is off the charts. So how can we expect to produce professional content like a podcast and other interesting things that come from that podcast and have people engage in them? And when we were doing Facebook, like a year and a half ago, we were getting good results, and it just keeps going down because the algorithms change all the time, and they're squeezing a free model. Facebook is, as an example,
Mm-hmm.
And if you want your stuff to get read or seen or listened to, you have to pay to play. It's never been like that in LinkedIn. I mean, they choke you off,
right.
But if you provide more value, they will open the gates. And that's the way it goes. Like if you're dedicated, they want you to fill up their news channels, right? Their feeds, their activity feeds. And that right now you're spending more time on LinkedIn and you're benefiting from that because, and I've tailed off a little bit because some of this work I'm doing. But, when I was more committed to it, we were getting, I think 500 to 1,500 views every time we put something out. And I know that's where you're sitting right now. I've come down a little bit just because of that, but you can get there if you're dedicated to it. And that's what you want. You don't expect to get everything for free and easy because then everybody would get the same and that wouldn't work for you. But that's an incredible stat. Another great stat is I've always been really bothered by the idea that people say LinkedIn is a B2B marketplace. I think to myself all the time, so who are these, the Bs? Like I get the first business, that's me or you. But who's the second one? Well, it's a person who owns a business, who works in a business, who is affiliated with a business. Are they not a consumer? Are they not a successful consumer with money? And the answer is hell yeah. I mean, so why would we completely ignore some myth out there that LinkedIn is only B2B? So I started looking for more stats, and the truth is they're at 500 million right now, LinkedIn, but their goal is to get to 2.5 billion. And guess who's at 2.5 billion? Facebook. So is it possible that in the next 5 to 10 years, LinkedIn is as big, but way more appropriate for this type of for the outcomes that all of our listeners are looking for, which is not to be entertained, but to be inspired, educated, informed, aware, open, in the know, all those things. There's so much to learn from LinkedIn. Every day I learn something new from LinkedIn, and it's incredible. I don't have the same outcomes when I go to Facebook. I can learn some stuff, but there's a lot of stuff in between that elicit different vibes and feelings from me, and I find I get really unfocused when I'm on Facebook because it's all over the place.
I just posted something on Facebook, Kirk, that said, the way to achieve enlightenment is to argue with your friends on Facebook.
I don't even engage it to that level, but I definitely, from time to time I go to Facebook and read stuff, and it serves a purpose, no doubt. And I understand that some people, it's a really important part of their life, and other people it's less so. Anyway.
There's two more statistics. I want to touch on one of the two. I'm going to touch on the 0.2% very quickly. Oh, it's 0.2% of users have published an article on LinkedIn. Just leave that there for a second. Now, this isn't just a post. This is an article. And if you look at what LinkedIn favors you doing the work. Facebook favors you paying money. That's a huge philosophical difference between those two social media platforms. LinkedIn is going to reward your organic thought leadership. And one of the things that we do is we take your podcast and turn it into organic thought leadership. And 0.2%, talk about being undersaturated. I mean, you're talking about 550,000, podcasts being undersaturated. 0.2% of 500 million. That's nothing. That's no humans out there. And you as financial services professionals just really need to realize that you can be your own loud. You can broadcast your message in a very easy way and get it read because you got 11 times more likely to engage in content. You got 500 million people. What do you need? 0.01% of that to grow a successful business, and only 2.2%, not 2%, 0.2% of people have actually published.
So there's a lot of room for professional content on LinkedIn. It's not even close to being a crowded space. It feels like that for you and I because we have large followings, and a lot of connections. But certainly for most people, it's not like that. So another great stat is that 45% of readers are upper level management. So the people that are most engaged in content are people who are there to learn and get better and who have large incomes and disposable income, intelligent, well-educated. So there's wonderful opportunities there. So LinkedIn, if you haven't figured it out, we're kind of fans of it. And I think we give some pretty valid reasons and statistics why.
Right. So now we're going to move to the third point here, which is to how to proactively expand podcast audience with ideal listeners. So go.
Yeah. So this one is a little different, but because LinkedIn is such a great place, why don't we proactively connect with more people who would be ideal? So when I say ideal, you put, if you look at LinkedIn, you can upgrade to something called Sales Navigator. And in Sales Navigator, there's an advanced search. And there's a number of criteria that you can do. It's not as targeted as Facebook, right? You can't get to the depths and the levels of what did you eat for breakfast and who do you know and crazy stuff like that. But as you know, Facebook's in a bit of trouble for that kind of stuff. So, but what you can do is go as deep as you can. You can create Boolean strings, which means that you can identify keywords to look at or not, and that'll enrich the ability to target as specific as you can with your audience. But the idea that you can proactively go out and invite people who you think would be interested in what you do, your specialty, and what you can do for them as a special niche, that being proactive there is a huge deal. Because most of the advisors that we've worked with and know, they've not put the time and work into building those, like a network of those kinds of people in LinkedIn. So just think about it. If you can, over time, add a couple hundred people a month to your network over a couple of years, you've got a pretty amazing following. And guess what? All those people that you just invited, they're not going anywhere. So there's equity in that, which is an incredible thing to think of when you think about when you pay for marketing is, am I building equity in what I do? If every time I do something more, every month I pay for something or do something more, is my marketing worth more? And podcasting and LinkedIn, everything you do, it's worth more the next month. Does that make sense? So
absolutely.
When you have 10 podcasts, it's better than when you had one. When you have 20 podcasts, better than when you had 10. You get more credibility. You've probably improved your business and how you offer value and how you communicate. Your listeners now see, wow, you've got 20 podcasts. And guess what? Matt and Kirk are now at 170 something podcasts. These guys must know what they do, and this must be working. They must be onto something, and they must have an audience that's driving this. So instant credibility, that credibility is way better than it was when we had 20. And that's just the way it goes. Yeah. So when you think about marketing, think about that. Some marketing isn't a bad idea, but I would consider combining it with something that is building equity, right? So all the equity most people used to get was, can I collect an email address? But this is a LinkedIn connection is better than an email address. Trust me.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit because, direct mail, email marketing, even text message marketing, that is a push to you, and you are going to consume that, not necessarily at your own will. And podcasting and LinkedIn is different. Podcasting, the podcast is going to be pushed directly to the person's listening device, and they can listen to it at their convenience. And it's the same thing with LinkedIn. You go on LinkedIn to search for stuff, to learn stuff from people you trust, right? So the whole premise underneath these two things working together, it's very, very, very seamless because one, it really accentuates the other. Is that where you're thinking?
Yeah, I was just thinking financial advisors are going to hopefully appreciate this little analogy, but imagine being in a meeting with a potential investor, a client, and they ask you a question. And then right after they ask you that question, they proceed to dissect how they're going to answer it. And they end up over the course of about a minute answering the question for themselves, and you just have to sit there and smile, which is what you just did, right? You asked a question and then you answered it. That's a wonderful thing. And that's mm-hmm. Which is actually what podcasting and all this is doing is it's helping people answer questions for themselves so that when they talk to you, you don't have to sit there selling them. Right? I've got this great little diagram that I made recently. And on the far left, it's got our advisor blueprint. If you're not familiar with that, it's attract, intrigue, engage, influence. And those are 4 different stages or strategies that you need to consider in your marketing. You got to address all 4 of those. And at the mark, just after attraction, I put a red dot and I drew a line and I said, that's a lead. And you attract and then you try to convert right away. And what do you do there is you have to sell to that person. So they are typically a non-believer. They've got some level of interest because they clicked on something, but there's not a developed interest, and they're not informed, and they don't know how you do things, all that kind of stuff. What we focus on is taking people to the end of that blueprint, that spectrum, if you will, which is attract, then intrigue them with an incredible message about what you do and who you do it for. Then engage them in all kinds of professional content, podcast, blog, white paper, whatever it may be. And then over time, influence them, get them connected to your social channels, your email, and keep in touch with them. Build rapport, educate, and you're building a relationship all this time. And guess what? At the end and then at some point, they start a conversation, and you've already got a relationship. You don't have to sell; they're already sold. They come to you and say, "I've been listening." Kirk, Matt, I've listened to 20 plus podcasts that you've done, and I love everything you guys talk about. I love what you're doing. It's wonderful. I know I need to work with you guys. Can you guys just tell me how it works and how do we get there?
Dude, you've had those phone calls. So have I. It's unbelievable. It took us a while again, because this is real marketing. It takes a little bit of time, but my sales process went from like 3 or 4 phone calls to like 2. Right. One, they want to make sure that we're legit and, find out a little bit more about us and, hey, I've been listening to your podcast, and they just kind of, poke test. And then the second phone call is a decision. It's freaking awesome.
I'll be honest. I'm at 1. A lot more.
Oh, shut up, man.
And it's because everybody understands and it makes so much sense. And this is part of what we're talking about today. But, the reason we're here is to educate you guys, not talk about our, sales. So, the thing about LinkedIn is that if you have a good message, you can connect and invite with people. And if you're constantly doing that, you're bringing new people into your world. And the best way to do that is to talk to them about your podcast. Say, like, instead of saying, I want to connect and I'm going to bug you, or I'm going to sell you, or I'm going to send you this stupid message that's going to be, some big offer or call to action, to say, look, I like to connect. You look like you'd be somebody that we'd share some interest, some mutual interest in. And if you want to learn a little bit more about, what I do and how I help people, you can listen to my podcast. And guess what? Then, you can follow up with that with other things that they can do to learn more, and or ways that you might be able to help them. So there's all kinds of, it's a different way to introduce yourself to people other than just pressing that little connect button. And or, hey, I found you on LinkedIn, thought we should connect. Okay, what's in it for me? Who are you? I know people still, do that a lot, but and I will admit I've done that over the years. But it's just a lazy way to try to expand your networks, and there's better ways to do that, right?
Yeah. Now, you coined a phrase, micro-influencer. And the reason why it went from being an influencer to micro-influencer was actually a very ingenious epiphany. Why don't you talk about what a micro-influencer is and how that's different? Because that's what you're talking about. You're talking about engaging the audience and becoming an influencer of their lives over time. And you, again, shrunk that down to micro-influencer. Why don't you define what that means?
So first I'm going to tell you a story about how this came to be. And it's another gift from LinkedIn. And that is that, being active on LinkedIn, somebody had responded to something I had sent, and they said, you had me until you used the word influencer in something I was expressing. I wasn't making an offer. I was just talking about, marketing ideas, and I used the word influencer. And I replied back to that person. I can't remember their name. I wouldn't say it anyway, but I said, I totally agree with you. I don't like or prefer the word influencer because it's too grand and it's too big. I said, but I don't know what else to say. And then I said, and another word that lots of people don't like, and me at times as well, is the word thought leader. Because we throw these terms around like they're easy to attain or like that everybody can do them. And an influencer, when I think about it, and when I thought about putting that out into the world and representing what I wanted to help people achieve, it wasn't true. I said, well, I don't really want to help anybody be the next Tony Robbins. The people that we work with, they don't aspire to that. I mean, some of them want to be bigger and do, a little bit bigger than that, but usually that's not the case. And the truth is what we want to help them achieve is micro-influence. And micro-influence is an advisor or company that owns a specific expertise for a specific audience in a specific region. And that, when I came up with that, or I thought about that, I thought that's what our audience wants. That's what we want to help people achieve. And more importantly than us being involved is what they should want to achieve for themselves. Is how do I own an expertise? How do I own an expertise that an audience and that audience that cares about that in the region that I want to work in? And that region could be really smaller, could be a little bit bigger. It's up to that that person who wants to own it. Mike, that is what micro-influence is. Way more achievable, attainable, way clearer strategies because and way less of a spend because there are very practical ways. I think that's probably one of my favorite things about all these things we're talking about is they are not terribly complicated. There is a fair amount of different skills needed, but it's not the most expensive thing. It's a lot less expensive than some alternatives. And I won't get into those alternatives because some of those alternatives can actually be great marketing. In fact, be incredible coupled with this. Seminars is an example. Yeah. Seminars and this could be a heck of a thing for those who are so dedicated to make both of them happen at the same time. But that is what micro-influence is.
I love that you just brought up the fact that you can use this with other things, especially with a seminar. I'm going to touch on that really quickly, and then we'll begin to wrap up the last part of this podcast. But can you imagine at the end of your seminar, if people don't set appointments, which there are people who don't set appointments, that you could just say, hey, why don't you, if you didn't set an appointment tonight, if you want more education, much like what we talked about tonight, all you have to do is follow our podcast and then just walk them through those steps. It's very, very simple. You go on your phone and you look for podcasts, you click on podcasts, you tell them the name of your podcast and say, hit subscribe. And then every time we come out with a new podcast at your convenience, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, you can listen to our podcast and continue with the education that we began tonight. What an amazing nurture sequence. Because what happens to a lot of people is they go to the seminars, right, Kirk? And then the advisor's like, well, they were already here. I'm not going to talk to them again. And they're not paying attention to people who have already met them, right? Have already experienced them, but they don't want to deal with it because they didn't set an appointment immediately. This is turning that ending of that seminar on its head and truly becoming, part of that influencer continuum. But let's talk about
at a seminar. You walk in, you sit down, and the advisor starts talking, and then in their bio, they whoever's introducing them says, and the founder and host of blah 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 podcast, My Wealth Podcast, or something like that, right? And you don't think everyone in the audience is going to pipe up to that, listen to that? Oh wow, they have their own podcast.
Yeah,
I'm telling you right now, podcasting is one of the most interesting things an advisor can say that they do. It is. It's different. It's intimate. It's interesting. It showcases personality. It's on their time, on their terms, not yours. It's on demand because it's on demand. It's you're having fun doing it, so you're probably more fun to listen to than when So there's so many incredible factors, and those are just some of the things that make podcasting. We're going on and on, but anyway, let me tell you this quote that I got recently. Quote: It was a an email from somebody, and it said, if you can't deliver leads, don't call me back. And I think the reason I'm bringing this up is because, one, it was inspiring for me to have that kind of feedback. But the second one is, if you want to have success, there's a great quote I use this tool called mindmeister.com, and they have quotes all the time. And they're saying it's not the new ideas that hold me back. It's the new thinking that holds me back. It's the inability to undo what I already know. Something like that. And I thought that really affects advisors, because you've been fed by the same people pretty much very similar information for many, many years. And one of the things that one of the reasons Matt and I do this podcast is to try to change the mindsets of people and try to explore these new opportunities and ways. And maybe you're thinking this isn't all that new of a mindset, but I think the idea that leads are everything is a problem. And I think you need to think maybe, we like to say lead generation is dead. And that's a bold statement. I'm not sure it's 100% true, because, we could argue the ambiguity of what a lead is. But to me, a lead is somebody that you attract and quickly try to sell. And I think that's a big waste of time. What we're trying to do is build relationships, ignite relationships, inspire relationships, nurture those relationships, influence those relationships, and on their terms the entire way. And if you can do that, that's the new marketing, right? And when you talk to most marketers, everybody's kind of throwing the kitchen sink at you. We got click people, we've got retargeting people, we've got Facebook people, we've got Twitter people, we got branding people, website people, webinar people, seminar people, LinkedIn people, we got podcast people, we got white paper people, we got search people, we got Instagram people, we got click or anything people, we got blog people, we got video people, right? We got email nurture people. How many other people do we have? There's a lot of people, right? And everybody's got their own mandate. And you can say the same thing about us. But what we're trying to do is connect the most effective things that can actually work really well with other things, and they're efficient. And so what we're doing and what we're doing is we've come up with a strategy, and what we're trying to do is, of course, we're always trying to sell what we do, but we're trying to sell the concept and a new mindset that don't think of everything like leads. Think about it, igniting relationships, inspiring relationships, influencing people, educating people on their terms, so that you build a relationship, and when they come to you, they don't need to be sold to. They just need to be told, this is how it's going to work. Not told, but, questioned and answered. And that's what we want to get to. And the micro-influencer program is really three things. We've gone over all three of them today. I just said a programmer, but the micro-influencer strategy is three things. So the micro-influencer strategy is proactively invite people in LinkedIn who are ideal opportunities and prospects for you to have a relationship with, and find a very nice and friendly way to reach out and connect with them. And you should do a couple hundred a week. Do not do them all in one day. Do not exceed 100 in a day, but find a way, have a personalized message, and get that done. It is fairly laborious to do that. Have an assistant do it or hire a company. It's one of the things that we do here. But you should absolutely be doing that. You'll need Sales Navigator to achieve that. And you should probably have a schedule once or a calendar link if they decide, hey, you know what you're doing is really cool. Let's just talk now. Because that's a possibility. I always want to give them the possibility that they can reach out to you right away if they want to. The second thing is, you're not going to really impress them that much if you don't have a great LinkedIn profile. So you want to enhance your profile. And if you're not consistently sharing on LinkedIn, because that shows a lot of depth, credibility, that you're not just, because I see this all the time. Somebody throws out an offer, but they're not really adding any value to my world. Those people fall off my list really quick, and they'll fall off your list too. So you want to make sure that you're really strong on LinkedIn in both those areas. And the most important part is you got to have a voice. You got to be your own loud. You got to have a podcast. If you can have a podcast, that fills in a lot of the gaps. The credibility, what kind of person are you? A good communicator? Do you really know and understand me as a person and my ideal and me as an ideal client? Do you get me? Does what you do actually solve the problems that I actually have? So if you can convey all that through your podcast, man, you've got a great opportunity for us to build a relationship. And that relationship may just be me promoting you to other people, which is wonderfully acceptable for a financial advisor. We don't need to be clients, but if you're going to sing my praises, who am I to get in your way? So, in fact, I'm going to keep feeding you more information so you'll keep telling other people about me. And so those three things together are really incredible. And the neat thing about podcasting is it's very versatile. And one of the things that we're spending a lot of time doing right now is multiplying content. So there's technology now where you can create audio clips and share an audio clip. So somebody might not want to spend 45 or 25 minutes listening to your podcast. I know this one's gone on longer than we usually do, but there's audio clips. You can create a quote meme from a quote that you have. It's very easy to do that. You can use a tool called canva.com, and there's other meme type things that you can create, tools. And so those are really important. And then you could transcribe it and have a blog post written from it, and you can easily turn it into a video. So those are all things that we do here, but that you can figure out to do. So it's a very versatile medium that you can turn into other kinds of content, and then you can share that content on LinkedIn all the time. So those are some pretty incredible strategies to pursue a micro influence strategy. Hopefully, I've got most of the points out there. But this is marketing. Right? This is when things connect like this, that's marketing. Just think of it. If you put these three leading edge and practical marketing tactics into effect, and each of these build on one another and create equity in their own right, how can this not be an incredible strategy for you to implement?
And just to put all of this into true perspective and proofs in the pudding, this is how Kirk and I have grown Top Advisor Marketing. I mean, this is it. This is, using our networks, using LinkedIn and using the podcast, those things working together and have just created this momentum that's allowed us to one, have a great time doing what we do, and two, help a bunch of people, which by the way has been somewhat lucrative. So Kirk, any closing thoughts before we wrap up today's podcast? One of my favorite
statements, and this one keeps coming up with advisors that I'm talking to about this strategy, is that they need to stop buying leads and they need to invest in a system that they own. So stop buying leads and invest in a system you own. And what I mean by owning is what I got alluded to earlier, that you're building equity all the time. And it's a system that you can own. Own your podcast, own your LinkedIn channel, all that stuff. And I think it's think about embracing a new mindset to get you there.
Thanks, man.
That was fun. I think it's a long story. So apologies for keeping everybody on a little bit longer, but hopefully every minute was worth it.
Hey, Kirk, I think when people know when I'm introducing that it's you and I doing a podcast, it's going to be a little longer.
True.
Yeah. All right. So everybody, if you want to know more about this micro-influencer package, all you have to do is go to topadvisormarketing.com. We've got a whole bunch of great information there. If you want to know more, if you want to reach out to either Kirk or me directly, it's kirk@topadvisorm.com or matt@topadvisorm.com. And as I've said on the last probably 20 podcasts, if you have an idea or a guest that you think should be on this podcast, either a topic that we cover or a person who should be interviewed by us, please make sure that you email me at matt@topadvisorm. M is for marketing, topadvisorm.com. And if you don't mind, please just take a moment to give us a quick review on iTunes. We'd really, really appreciate it. It's great feedback. Also helps us with our search engine optimization on iTunes specifically. But after you've done 170 some odd podcasts, we're pretty much on the upper end of it anyway. But it does give us really good feedback, and it is nice to hear that you guys like it. And if you know of a financial services professional, if you know of an estate planning attorney, a CPA, or an insurance agent who wants to be able to become a micro-influencer, and going back to the definition that Kirk had said, which is an advisor or company that owns a specific expertise for a specific audience in a specific region. We have talked about niches and niches on this ad nauseum. This is the perfect way, the perfect culmination, the perfect storm for all of this to come together. So for everybody on Top Advisor Marketing and for all of you out there, I want to thank you very much for listening. This is Matt Halloran, and we'll see you on the other side of the mic very soon.
Are you ready to change the way you communicate with your clients? Are you tired of being the best kept secret in your area? Learn how to become a prolific online influencer, attract more ideal clients, and grow your business. Contact us today and see what the power of podcasting can do for your business. Click on the Contact Us link on our website at topadvisormarketing.com and set up a call to learn more. Follow us on LinkedIn and Facebook for more updates and information.
This was brought to you by Iris.xyz, a platform helping financial professionals become better in business and life through new media and new voices. Visit them and learn more at Iris.xyz.